"Stop! Don't turn around," she whispered. The human turned and froze in shock. The lunch hour at Relo's station hit with its usual weight. Dense noise, clatter of trays, metallic echoes bouncing off walls built for efficiency, not comfort. The smell of grilled fowl, boiled grain, and recycled steam clung to the air like a film. Workers from 3 species lined up shoulder to shoulder, heads down, pushing through the routine that kept the station running. Thomas Cade stepped into the canteen and paused only long enough to feel the change in temperature. Warm, humid, crowded, before he moved forward. The tray in his hand felt heavier than it should have. A lingering habit from years of military postings made him scan the room automatically. Exits, clusters of people, tension points. Nothing unusual. Just another shift in another border colony hub. He wasn't here to enforce anything. Those years were behind him. Now he spent his rotations inspecting structural integrity reports, reviewing emergency barriers, and making sure the outpost stayed within safety parameters. It was quieter work. That's why he took it. He'd had enough of noise. Today he planned to finish his meal quickly, run diagnostics on the maintenance deck, and update the cargo walkway assessment. Simple, predictable, no complications. Then he saw her again. She sat outside the side door on the concrete lip of the loading bay, the tray balanced on her knees. The light spilling from the canteen framed her in an unflattering strip of brightness. Enough to see that her portion was half the size of his, enough to see her shoulders bare in the cold. Purple skin with darker tones along her arms. White hair pulled back with a cloth strip that had clearly been repurposed several times. Gray-blue overalls tied at her waist. The black sleeveless undershirt hugging her torso and leaving little insulation against the breeze. Sarental. He'd learned her name only because one of the logistics workers had said it yesterday. Loud enough for it to carry, but quiet enough to pretend it hadn't. Something about the alien girl who refuses assimilation. He caught only fragments. He didn't press for more. She was a non-citizen worker, assigned to cleaning and crate inventory in Cargo Ring B. Her shift overlapped with his meal window. That was the only reason their paths crossed. That and the sign. External consumption zone, non-citizen staff. A narrow, printed reminder mounted without ceremony above the door. The yellow line, painted on the concrete below, it matched the edges of her feet. Thomas stood at the threshold longer than he intended. A worker brushing by him muttered impatiently, jolting his shoulder. He stepped aside and let the crowd swallow around him. Another day, he might have ignored the sign, told himself the system had its own logic. Focused on his mission, maintain safety reports, keep out of HR politics, stay the neutral outside consultant they expected. He looked at her again. Saren sat upright, refusing to lean back against the cold wall. Her posture remained rigid, protective. Every time the door swung open, her shoulders tensed before she forced them still. She didn't look up, didn't react to the stream of people passing inside. He felt something shift in his chest, small but definite. Discomfort, annoyance, empathy mixed with a sharper thought. If I walk inside, I'm part of this. He made the decision before he finished the thought. He pushed through the door into the colder air. Footsteps behind him slowed. Conversations faded for a beat. Someone cleared their throat. He heard it all, and it didn't turn around. Saren didn't raise her head when his shadow reached her tray. "They'll tell you can't sit here," she said. Her voice was steady, not surprised, as if she'd seen the rejection enough times to predict it. Thomas lowered himself beside her, feeling the concrete's cold bite through his uniform trousers. He set his tray on his knee. "Then they can tell me," he said. She turned her head slightly, enough for him to see the faint exhaustion under her eyes. Silver gray, ringed darker at the edges. Beautiful in a way she clearly never used as a weapon. "You're human," she said. "You have a table inside. I noticed. You'll get reported for this." "Probably." Her eyebrows lifted a fraction, almost a question. He picked up his fork without explaining further. They ate in silence for a moment. Her food, Varan root mash and a few strips of synth meat, was arranged neatly. She ate slowly, stretching the portions. Her hand trembled once when the wind hit her. He split one of his extra meat strips and placed it on her tray. Her jaw tightened. "They'll say you contaminated it," she said. "They say a lot of things," he answered. She didn't thank him. She didn't reject it either. She shifted it to her side of the tray with the back of her fork, eyes lowered. The door behind them opened again. A group stepped out to smoke. One man stared at Thomas with open disbelief. "Inspector Cade," the man said, voice dipped in derision. "Didn't know the yard had become fashionable." "Just eating," Thomas said. The man gave a dismissive snort and walked off. Saren watched them go, expression unreadable except for the slight tightening at the corners of her mouth. "They think you're making a statement," she said. "I'm eating. You can make your life easier by going inside." He met her eyes. "You can make yours easier by going inside." She shook her head once. "Not the same." He didn't argue. Her tone carried enough history to make any explanation redundant. The supervisor approached sooner than Thomas expected. "Sir," the man said, standing over them with a tablet under his arm. "This area is designated for non-citizen consumption. You're required to eat inside." Thomas finished chewing, then looked up. "Where is that written?" "It's implied protocol," the supervisor said, trying to keep the edge from his voice. "I prefer explicit rules," Thomas replied. Saren's breathing changed, barely, but enough. A short, careful inhale. A braced exhale. "You're a guest on this station, Mr. Cade," the supervisor continued. "We ask external staff not to interfere with local HR arrangements." "I'm eating," Thomas repeated. "Not interfering. You're disrupting harmony." "Am I?" The supervisor's jaw worked. "If you persist, this becomes a human resources matter." Thomas kept his voice level. "If HR wants me, they can message me directly." For a moment, nothing moved. The supervisor's eyes flicked from Thomas to Saren, then to the sign above the door. He left with a strained politeness. When the door closed behind him, Saren spoke softly. "You shouldn't do this." "Too late," he said. "They'll turn it into something bigger than lunch." "So will I, apparently." She let out a rough sound, somewhere between disbelief and something else. "You used to be military," she said. "Long time ago. Still looks like it. You sit like someone waiting for orders." He looked down at himself, back straight, knees angled out, fork held loosely but ready. She wasn't wrong. "What about you?" he asked. She scraped the last of her mash together with deliberate precision. "Cargo lines, cleaning cycles, sorting. Nothing interesting." "You came here alone?" She paused, then nodded once. "We're a contract," she said. "Prepaid lodging. 3-year cycle. I needed the credits." He watched her reposition her tray on her knees, careful, almost ritualistic. "You planning to leave after the contract ends?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Haven't decided," she said. He detected something in her tone, something guarded, as if deciding required options she didn't have. He didn't push. A shift alarm sounded faintly in the distance. Saren stood, the movement stiff but controlled. She carried her tray to the slot by the wall. The warmth from inside the canteen washed over her briefly before fading again. "You'll sit inside tomorrow," she said. "They all do after the first warning." Thomas stepped beside her and opened the door panel. "We'll see," he said. She hesitated just long enough for him to notice, then walked through the door without looking back. As he turned to return his own tray, he caught a cluster of workers watching him with tight, unreadable expressions. By the time he reached his narrow pod that night, the advisory message was already waiting. He read it once while standing under the dim light. "Deviation from recommended consumption protocols. Non-citizen zone reserved for cultural accommodation. Future non-compliance will be reviewed." He deleted it and shut off the console. He lay on his narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling for a long moment, thinking of her rigid posture, the half portion, the cold concrete under her feet. He felt irritation from the day settle into something steadier. A line drawn cleanly in his mind. Whatever tomorrow brought, he already knew where he'd sit. The next day began like any other on Reload Station. Lights rising in gradual bands, ventilation systems kicking into a deeper hum, and shift alarms echoing through narrow dorm corridors. Thomas woke before the alarm, as he usually did. Years of assignments on different outposts left him with a body clock that didn't trust artificial cycles. He showered quickly in the narrow stall, dried off with a rough station towel, and checked the schedule on his console. Half the day would be spent reviewing load-bearing supports on Deck 7 and confirming that last week's cracked tension bracket had been replaced properly. Straightforward tasks. No conflicts expected. He dressed in standard work blacks. Fitted shirt, dark utility pants, boots with reinforced soles. His jacket hung on a hook by the door. He hesitated for a moment, then left it. The canteen always ran warm. Outside the side door would be cold, but manageable. When the lunch window arrived, he carried his tray through the crowd again. The same smells hit him: fried fowl, grain steam, old metal. Workers moved in tight flows around him, conversations running over each other. He noticed a few glances following him this time. Quick, subtle, and not friendly. He pushed open the side door. Cold air washed over him. The concrete yard waited with the same stains, the same dull benches, the same yellow line. But Saren wasn't in the exact spot she'd used before. She was a little further down the wall, knees drawn up, tray balanced carefully. Her hair was tied back again, but looser today, a few strands falling forward across her cheek. She looked up as he approached. "You're persistent," she said. "I'm hungry," he answered as before. She eyed the full tray, then the door behind him. "They're watching you more today. I noticed. You don't seem bothered." "I didn't say I wasn't." No smile, but her shoulders eased slightly. He slid down beside her and set his tray on his knee again. She was eating a similar meal to yesterday. Varan mash, greens, a strip of meat cut thinner than the standard portion. He noticed her portion sizes again and decided to address it without making it obvious. "You always get half servings?" he asked casually. Saren kept her eyes on her tray. "Depends on who's working the line." "That's supposed to be normal?" "Normal for us," she said. "Non-citizens don't get the same rations unless we hit quota." The quota changed last month. He stopped eating for a second. "Changed how?" "Higher targets. Same pay. More cuts if you fall short." She used her fork to press the mash into a smaller shape. "It's why I take the outside shift. Fewer people. Faster access to crates." He studied her expression. She didn't sound bitter, just tired in a way that settled into her bones. He split one of his meat strips again, sliding it onto her tray without ceremony. She didn't comment. She just moved it to the side with a controlled motion, jaw tight. The side door opened behind them. 3 workers stepped out to smoke. They paused when they saw Thomas sitting there again. Their conversation went quiet. One of them, a woman with a datapad tucked under her arm, gave Saren a long look. "Still outside?" she said to Saren. Saren didn't answer. The woman clicked her tongue, muttered something under her breath, and walked off with the others. Thomas let the silence settle before he spoke. "You ever think about signing the assimilation forms?" he asked. Her reaction was immediate. A sharp inhale, her fingers tightening around her fork. "No," she said. "Why not?" She looked at the concrete for a moment, then at him. "Because they don't want me to become a citizen. They want me to become something they can supervise." He kept his voice low. "That what they told you? That's what the form spells out." She wiped a smear of mash from the corner of her tray. "New housing unit. Mandatory advisor. Restrictions on relationships. Work placement decided for you. They call it integration. It's ownership." Thomas went quiet. The cold from the concrete seeped into his legs. The wind tugged at the loose strands of her white hair, brushing them lightly across her cheek. He had dealt with structures like this before. Policies treated as kindness. Compliance disguised as choice. It made something in him tighten. "You came here on a 3-year contract, right?" he asked. She nodded. 18 months left. "You planning to leave when it ends?" "I'd like to. I don't know if I'll have the credits." She exhaled once, slow. "You used to be military. You know what it's like to be stuck somewhere, because paperwork says so." "Yeah," he said. "I do." Before either of them said more, the supervisor stepped out. He held the tablet again, posture stiffer than yesterday. "Inspector Cade," he said. "Human Resources has requested to speak with you." Thomas didn't move. "Now?" he asked. "Yes," the supervisor said. "Now." Saren's back straightened. Thomas stood slowly, set his tray on the ground, and faced the supervisor. "What about her?" Thomas asked. "Miss Tall remains where she is," the supervisor said. Thomas didn't look away. "No," he said. "She comes." The supervisor blinked. That isn't customary. Neither is segregating a lunch area, Thomas said. A brief silence hung between them. The supervisor's jaw worked. I'll have to check with HR, he said. Do that, Thomas said. He waited. Saren stood as well, her tray balanced in her hands. He noticed the faint tremor in her fingers. Not from cold, from something heavier. After a short exchange on the supervisor's comm, he nodded stiffly. Both of you, he said. Follow me. Thomas glanced at Saren. Her chin lifted slightly. Not defiant. Prepared. They walked inside the station corridors, following the supervisor's brisk pace. Workers stepped aside to let them pass. A few watched Saren with quick, uncomfortable glances. Others looked at Thomas as if he had crossed a line that everyone else knew never to approach. Saren kept her focus ahead, her steps controlled. He walked half a step beside her, not shielding her, just refusing to trail behind. Why are you doing this? She murmured. Because I'm already involved, he said. You don't know what they'll do. I don't care. She looked at him for half a second. Something in her shoulders eased again. Not trust, but recognition. When they reached the HR wing, the corridor lights dimmed into softer tones. The walls were smoother here, the panels newer. Everything looked designed to project order. The supervisor stopped in front of a room with a black glass door. They're waiting, he said. Thomas touched the panel, and the door slid open. The room was small, clean, and too quiet. 3 officials sat behind a long table. Their tablets were arranged neatly, their posture straight. Documentation screens hovered behind them in low light. Saren inhaled sharply. Not fear, preparation. Thomas stepped in first and pulled out the chair closest to her. Sit, he said quietly. She did. He took the chair beside hers. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Whatever came next would not happen in the yard or the canteen. It would happen here, under polished lights and quiet voices. Saren's knee brushed his under the table. She didn't pull away. He didn't either. The official in the center folded her hands and looked at Thomas. Inspector Cade, she said, we have concerns about your behavior. Thomas leaned back slightly, shoulders square. Then let's discuss them, he said, and the room fell into its first, heavy silence. The HR room held a quiet that felt engineered. No Vince's word, no footfalls echoed from the hall. Even the lighting was softened to a flat white that made it impossible to read expressions at a distance. The 3 officials behind the table watched Thomas and Saren with still, practiced faces. The woman in the center spoke first. Inspector Cade, we'll begin with your actions in the canteen. Thomas rested his hands on the table, fingers relaxed. Saren sat straight beside him, her palms flat against her thighs, her breathing controlled. I sat down to eat, he said. You did so in a restricted area, the official replied. Restricted for her, Thomas said. Not for me. The man on the left tapped his screen. You were given an advisory yesterday. You ignored it today. Thomas didn't look away. I don't follow implied rules. The official looked at Saren. Miss Tall, the external zone exists because you declined assimilation protocol. It was created to avoid conflict. Saren lifted her eyes, the faint ring of silver catching the overhead lights. Conflict with who? With citizens who may be uncomfortable, the official said. Uncomfortable with what? Saren asked. My skin? My hair? My food? The man hesitated, then answered carefully. The policy is meant to maintain harmony. Thomas leaned forward. Harmony for who? Because she's never the one protected by it. The woman in the center shifted her tablet. We're not here to debate ethics. We are here because non-compliance by a visiting inspector is causing disruption. They're eating inside, Saren said quietly. I'm eating outside. Where is the disruption? The official's lips tightened. The disruption is him choosing to join you. They allowed the statement to hang in the air, as if it carried its own weight. The youngest official cleared his throat. Before we continue, we need to confirm something with Miss Tall. You've been approached 3 times about assimilation forms. You refused each time. Yes, she said. Is there a particular reason? I want my own housing, my own job choices, my own name. The form takes all of that. The man raised his brows. That's not entirely accurate. The form provides structure. It assigns an advisor to monitor every decision, Saren cut in, including who I live with, who I speak to, who I take meals with, who I sleep with. Her voice stayed level, but her jaw was tight. That's not structure. Thomas felt the air shift slightly. One of the officials shifted in her chair, uncomfortable. The center official folded her hands. Miss Tall, your refusal puts the station in a difficult position. The non-citizen dining arrangement only functions if it remains uncontested. You attracting attention undermines the purpose. Saren blinked once. What attention? I've eaten outside for 6 months. The official nodded at Thomas. Until now. Saren's fingers curled slightly at the edge of the table. Thomas spoke before she could. If the policy falls apart because one person sits down, then the policy wasn't built for stability. The woman exhaled slowly. Inspector, your contract is temporary. Your cooperation with station norms is expected. I cooperate with structural integrity and safety protocols, he said. Your dining arrangements aren't in my contract. The youngest official adjusted his tablet again. This isn't about dining. It's about signaling. You're encouraging noncompliance. Thomas kept his face neutral. I'm encouraging lunch. A brief silence passed. The center official finally tapped a button on her screen. Then we moved to corrective measures, she said. Saren's posture stiffened. What measures? Thomas asked. Standard postural correction for Miss Tall, the official said. She has repeatedly disrupted the accommodation by refusing assimilation and drawing attention to herself. A short cycle should reinforce compliance. Thomas stared at her, stunned by how casually she said it. Saren spoke before he did. It's unnecessary. I haven't broken anything. It isn't punitive, the official said. It's corrective. Saren's breathing shortened. Thomas turned his head toward her. What is it? He asked, low enough for only her to hear. Her eyes stayed on the table. A restraint rig. What kind? Anchors. Force position. You hold it until they stop the cycle. He could hear what she didn't add. Pain. Exhaustion. Shame. Thomas faced the officials again. You're doing this because she sat down to eat. You escalated it by involving yourself, the woman said. And what if I refuse to let you take her? The room stilled. The officials exchanged looks, brief but clear. He was pushing into territory no visiting inspector should approach. You have no authority to intervene, the woman said. Your presence is permitted only as an observer. Thomas understood the meaning immediately. We'll do what we want. You can watch. Saren looked at him then, just a small turn of her head, barely noticeable. But the look said everything. Don't. They'll make it worse. He didn't answer out loud, but he didn't break eye contact either. The official rose from her chair. We will proceed now, she said. Security will escort you. 2 officers appeared at the door the moment she pressed her tablet. Saren inhaled sharply and rose to her feet. Thomas followed. As they stepped into the corridor, one officer moved ahead of them. The other stayed behind. The hallway stretched long and bright, the glossy floor sending reflections up their legs. Where is this taking place? Thomas asked. The maintenance clearing, the officer answered. That area is not for disciplinary actions. It is when necessary. Saren walked in silence, each step measured. Thomas noticed the faint tremor in her hands. Not fear exactly, anticipation of something she already knew too well. Halfway down the corridor, he leaned slightly toward her. When did they last do this to you? He asked. She hesitated. A year ago. For what? Refusing a housing reassignment. He swallowed once, steadying the flare in his chest. How long did it last? 2 hours. He felt the weight of that number sink in. When they reached the exit hatch to the outside field, the wind coming through the seam smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. The officers keyed the lock, and the hatch slid open with a low hydraulic whine. The maintenance clearing opened wide around them. Packed dirt, scattered pylons, empty crates along the fence. The restraint array stood near the center. Clean black anchors sunk into the soil in perfect symmetry. A technician waited by a control pad. Saren stopped walking for just a breath. That single hesitation said more than anything she'd said inside the HR room. Thomas stepped closer to her. "You're not alone," he said quietly. She didn't look at him, but her fingers brushed his for the briefest moment. A flicker of contact, deliberate and small. The officer gestured. "Miss Tull, stand here." Saren moved to the indicated spot. Thomas followed until the second officer stepped in front of him. 3 meters, the officer said. "You stay behind the mark." Thomas looked down. A white line had been painted on the dirt. He stepped just behind it. Saren knelt slowly. The technician approached with a set of cuffs. They locked her wrists first, then her ankles, each mechanism snapping closed with quiet finality. Thomas watched every motion, memorizing each anchor point, each angle. The technician tapped his control pad. The array activated with a low hum. The anchors lifted Saren's body into a forced arch, feet planted, forearms braced, back held in a tight curve. She trembled almost instantly. Her hair spilled down toward the dirt. Sweat began to form along her hairline. The HR officials arrived last, standing several steps behind Thomas with untouched expressions. "Standard cycle," the lead official said. 2 hours. Saren clenched her jaw. Thomas felt a slow burn settle under his ribs. The technician adjusted the settings. Thomas took a step forward. "Don't," the officer warned. Saren opened her eyes, found his, and forced out a whisper. "No, look over there." Her voice shook but stayed sharp enough to direct him. Thomas followed her gaze to the far edge of the clearing. A small metal plaque was mounted on a stone riser beside the array. He stepped close enough to read it. Postural Corrective Array. Installed under Charter Amendment 3.4. Approved by Human Collegiate Joint Ethics Committee. Usage logged quarterly. Below that, another line. For the preservation of order and mutual comfort. Comfort, not safety, not necessity. Comfort. A second plaque listed numbers, tallies of cycle counts by species. The alien rows tripled the human ones. Saren's body shook harder. Her breath hitched. Sweat traced a line down her neck. Thomas stayed frozen for 2 seconds, long enough for something inside him to lock into place. He stepped toward her, crossing the line. The officer grabbed his arm immediately. Thomas leaned close enough that the officer felt his breath. "If you taste me, I fall on her," he said. "Your monitors will record you injuring a contracted inspector during corrective procedure." The officer's grip faltered. The HR official stiffened. Thomas pulled a small recorder from his pocket and held it up. "This array violates the Charter's Equal Dignity Clause," he said, voice steady. "I'm documenting everything." A murmur rose from the workers gathering near the fence. The lead official's expression cracked for the first time. "Shut down the cycle," she said. The technician hesitated. "Ma'am." "Shut it down." The hum died. The restraints released. Saren collapsed forward, and Thomas caught her before she hit the ground. Her body shook violently against him. Her breath came in quick, uneven pulls. The thin fabric of her shirt clung to her back, damp and warm. She pressed against him without strength to hold herself up. He lifted her fully, one arm under her knees, one supporting her back. The HR official spoke, voice sharp. "You were told not to interfere." "You turn it off," Thomas said. "Not me." Saren's fingers curled weakly into the fabric of his shirt. She buried her face briefly against his shoulder, catching a breath that sounded closer to a sob than anything she'd let slip before. Thomas held her tighter and stepped away from the array. Security didn't stop him. No one did. The world around them shifted in a quiet, invisible way. Something structural giving way, something long protected finally cracking open. He carried her across the clearing, her hair brushing his collar, her breath unsteady against his neck, and didn't look back at the machine once. He didn't need to. That part was already behind them. The medbay lights dimmed automatically as the cycle shifted into late shift hours. Most workers were already moving toward their dorm sectors, leaving the corridors outside quieter than usual. Thomas stayed in the same chair beside Saren's bed, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the slow rise and fall of her breathing. She hadn't spoken for almost 15 minutes, not from fear, but from exhaustion that weighed down every muscle. Her pulse monitor showed steady progress, but her body still twitched now and then from leftover strain. When she finally opened her eyes, the room's soft blue lighting reflected faintly across her pupils. "You're still here," she murmured. "You asked me to stay where you could see me." She studied him for a long moment. "People don't usually listen to what I want. I'm not people." Her gaze dropped briefly to his hands, large, steady, resting loosely between his knees. She seemed to notice something she hadn't earlier. He hadn't put his gloves back on, and the knuckles on his right hand were scraped, probably from gripping the officer who tried to stop him. "You got hurt," she said. "It's nothing. You shouldn't have grabbed him. He shouldn't have touched me." She shifted slightly on the bed, the thin blanket pulled to her collarbones. Her breathing hitched when her back tightened, and she grimaced. "Don't move too fast," he said. "Feels like everything inside me is pulling the wrong way." Your muscles were forced into an arc they weren't meant to hold. "Don't describe it," she whispered. "Not yet." He nodded. Respecting the boundary came naturally. She wasn't fragile, just worn down past the point where words helped. The medic returned briefly, checked her vitals again, left an electrolyte pack on the counter, and stepped out without interrupting them. The door hissed shut, and the room was quiet again except for the faint hum of the circulation vents. Saren's voice broke that silence. "They'll retaliate," she said. Thomas didn't sugarcoat it. "Probably. You'll lose your position. I've lost positions before. You'll be marked as difficult." He met her eyes. "They marked you long before I arrived. You think I'm afraid of a label?" She didn't answer immediately. She reached toward her shoulder, slow, careful, and tugged the blanket higher. Her undershirt had slipped slightly during the restraints. She pulled it into place with a shaky hand. Practical movements, not embarrassed ones. Just trying to feel covered again. He looked away for a moment to give her the space to adjust the blanket. When he looked back, she was watching him with a strange expression, part suspicion, part gratitude, and something else that hadn't surfaced before. "What were you before this?" she asked. "Before you became an inspector." "Field engineer," he said. "Before that, military logistics." "So the rumors were right." He shrugged. "Depends which rumors. That you were in the border conflict." Her voice softened. "That he got out early." "No one gets out early." "I did." "How?" "Wrong assignments. Wrong commanders. Wrong wars." He leaned back slightly. "Right decision to leave." She absorbed that quietly. "You don't talk like someone running from past." "I'm not running." He paused. "I just don't want to repeat it." The meaning hung between them, clear, unembellished. Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket again, lightly brushing the rough, stitched seam. "You didn't carry me out of there because of duty," she said. "Or rank. Or rules." "No." "Then why?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real. "You were shaking so hard you couldn't breathe," he said plainly. "And everyone was pretending that was normal. I couldn't watch that." Her eyes softened, and the smallest tremor crossed her lips. A breath, almost a sound, as if something inside her cracked open. "That machine," she said, voice low, "it's designed to make you think the pain is your fault. That if you were stronger, faster, more obedient, it wouldn't hurt." He nodded once. "It's still wrong." She swallowed, throat tight. "I've spent years convincing myself it was just part of the contract. That I chose this assignment. That this was better than where I came from." "Is it?" "It was supposed to be." He didn't ask about her home. If she wanted to tell him, she would. Instead, he adjusted his position, sat a little closer, not touching her but close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. "When your contract ends," he said, "you're leaving. And no one here gets to decide where you go next." She gave a faint laugh. Weak, tired, but real. "It's not that simple." "It can be." She tilted her head slightly on the pillow. "Why do you talk like you've already made plans for me?" "I talk like someone who's seen too many people trapped in systems built to break them." "That's not an answer." He looked at her long enough that the medic's monitor blinked twice before she spoke again. "You're serious," she whispered. "I am." Something fragile shifted inside her expression. An instinctive flinch, the kind someone has when kindness feels dangerous. "Don't make promises you won't keep," she said softly. "I haven't promised anything yet." "Then don't start." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he adjusted his position, sat a little closer, not touching her, but close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. "When your contract ends," he said, "you're leaving." Instead, he reached for the cup of Orvan water the medic had left earlier. He held it near her hand. "Drink," he said. She hesitated, then let her fingers close around the warm cup. He kept his hand beneath hers to steady it. Their skin brushed, a brief, warm contact with no ceremony. She drank slowly, breathing steadier with each sip. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." He took the cup back and set it aside. A distant announcement echoed through the corridor outside. Shift change. He expected the medic to return any second, but the room remained undisturbed. Saren adjusted her head on the pillow, her hair falling partly across her cheek. Her voice came quieter now. "What happens tomorrow?" "I sit beside you again," he said. "That's not what I meant." "I know." He leaned forward, resting forearms on his knees. "They'll try to pressure you," he said. "They'll try to isolate you. They'll try to convince you this was your fault." Her breath caught. "It always works." "Not this time." She closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing that sentence physically rather than intellectually. "Thomas," she said, opening them again, "I don't want you to get dragged into my problems." "You already dragged me," he said. "I walked there willingly." For the first time, she smiled, small, tired, genuine. "You're impossible." "I get that a lot." The medbay door slid open. The medic stepped in. "She needs sleep," he said. "You can stay, but don't overstimulate her." Saren's cheeks warmed a little. She tugged the blanket further up. Thomas stood. "I'll sit back." She reached out, not grabbing him, just lightly touching his wrist. "No," she whispered. "Stay where I can see you." He sat again. She closed her eyes. He watched her breathing slow until it evened out into soft, tired rhythms. He let the silence settle, steady and protective. Tomorrow, everything would get harder. Tonight, she slept without a machine forcing her into pain. And he didn't plan to leave her for a single second. The medbay lights dimmed further as the evening cycle rolled across the station. Most rooms settled into quiet, but the one Saren rested in held a different kind of silence. Thick, close, shaped by everything that had happened in the last few hours. Thomas remained in the same chair, angled slightly toward her. He hadn't removed his boots or jacket, but he had loosened the collar of his shirt. His posture stayed alert, though fatigue pulled at his shoulders. Saren stirred before she fully woke. Her fingers flexed under the blanket, brushing the edge of the thin fabric. She didn't open her eyes immediately. She seemed to be testing her muscles, checking if the stiffness had eased. When she finally looked toward him, her voice was rough but steady. "You didn't sleep at all." "I'm fine," he said. "You look like someone who's been sitting guard." "I was." Her eyes softened in a way he hadn't seen from her before. Quiet recognition, not gratitude exactly, but awareness that he meant it. The medic had left the infusion running on a slow cycle. A faint warmth came through her skin from where the fluid entered her bloodstream, easing the tightest knots along her spine. Thomas stood and stepped closer, but not too close. He paused beside the bed. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but not the same kind as earlier." He studied her face, the tension around her mouth, the slight pull between her brows. She wasn't trying to hide it. "Sit up a little," he said gently. She hesitated. "It hurts when I move." "I'll help you." She didn't argue. Instead, she lifted her left arm, inviting his support. He placed one hand carefully behind her back, fingers spreading along the upper part of her spine where the muscles were tightest, and his other hand steadied her shoulder. She drew a sharp breath when he lifted her, but she didn't pull away. Her body leaned toward his instinctively as she found a new position, half sitting, half resting against the raised portion of the bed. His touch remained steady, warm, grounding. "Better?" he asked. "A little." "You're still shaking." "I know," she whispered. Her hair had loosened over the hours, falling around her shoulders in soft, white strands. A few stuck to her cheek. Thomas reached forward, hesitated for a second, then brushed them aside with the back of his fingers. He moved slowly enough for her to stop him if she wanted. She didn't. Her eyelids fluttered once at the contact. She leaned subtly into his hand before catching herself. "You don't have to do that," she said quietly. I know. She looked at him, searching his expression. Then why did you? Because you needed it. She didn't look away. Her breathing deepened, not from pain this time, but from something warmer, heavier, unfamiliar. Her voice softened. No one has touched me gently in months. He lowered his hand, but didn't step back. You deserve gentleness, he said. Her throat tightened at that, and she exhaled slowly through parted lips. The infusion monitor beeped once, breaking the stillness. She flinched at the sound, and he steadied her by placing a hand lightly at her back again. Easy, he murmured. I'm fine, she whispered. I just startled. He remained where he was, close enough for her to feel the warmth from his body, far enough not to push her. Saren lifted her hand from under the blanket. Her fingers trembled slightly. She reached toward him, stopped halfway, then finally rested her fingertips on his forearm. He didn't move. He let her decide how far to go. Her touch was feather-light at first, then firmer as she gained confidence. She traced the line of muscle beneath the fabric of his sleeve, feeling steadiness where she lacked it. Your hands are warm, she said. Yours are cold. She drew her hand back slightly. Sorry, don't be. He reached for her hand, not grabbing it, just offering his palm. She placed her fingers in it slowly, uncertain until contact settled. He wrapped his hand around hers with gentle pressure, warming her knuckles. Her shoulders loosened, her breath uncoiled. This, she said, voice shaky, feels strange. Strange good or strange bad? Strange safe. He stayed quiet, letting her choose the pace. She shifted closer, not enough to touch him fully, just enough that he could feel her breath near his chest. The blanket slipped slightly from her shoulder, exposing the edge of her collarbone. She didn't fix it, and he didn't look away. Thomas, she murmured, her voice low, almost careful. Earlier, when you carried me, I felt something I didn't expect. What did you feel? She closed her eyes, searching for the words. When she opened them again, her voice had softened into something almost vulnerable. I felt wanted, not as property, not as a worker, just wanted by someone who saw me. He tightened his hold on her hand, not enough to startle her, just enough to say, I'm here. You're not something to be used, he said. You're someone to be chosen. She inhaled sharply, as if that sentence reached somewhere she had locked away. Her fingers curled around his hand. She leaned forward, not fully, but enough that her forehead briefly touched his chest. Her breath warmed the fabric of his shirt. Her body trembled once, then settled against him in a careful, hesitant surrender. Is this okay? He asked quietly. Yes. His hand moved to the back of her shoulder, slow and deliberate. She responded instinctively, her fingers gripping the front of his shirt, anchoring herself. Her voice came softer than anything she'd said tonight. Don't pull away. He didn't. She pressed closer, not out of desperation, but out of trust. Her body relaxed piece by piece, tension unwinding under his steady support. She let her cheek rest over his heartbeat, her breath syncing with his. For a moment, the station outside didn't matter. HR didn't matter. The array didn't matter. Just warmth, skin against fabric, share breath, the quiet safety of choosing someone and being chosen back. Her whisper barely reached him. Stay like this a little longer. I will. He tightened his arm around her gently, and she melted into the embrace, letting herself feel something she'd been denied for years. Real closeness, real safety, real contact without fear. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't forced. It wasn't a transaction. It was the first step into something deeper, something already pulling both of them forward whether they admitted it or not. Saren stayed against Thomas's chest longer than she intended. Her body softened gradually, as if each breath gave her permission to release something she'd been holding for months. The faint warmth of his shirt, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the quiet way he held her, none of it demanded anything from her. It simply existed, and she leaned into it. When she finally lifted her head, her cheeks slid slowly against the fabric. Her eyes met his. The soft medbay lights carved faint shadows under them both, giving the moment a stillness she wasn't used to. You should sleep, Thomas said quietly. I'm not tired. Her voice contradicted her half-lidded eyes. You're exhausted. She let out a small breath, not quite a laugh. Then stay here until I fall asleep. I don't want to wake up alone. I won't go anywhere. He shifted the chair closer to the bed. When she eased back onto the pillow, her hand tightened briefly around his sleeve, making sure he didn't move away too far. He didn't. As she settled, her fingers remained curled near the edge of the blanket. Thomas placed his hand next to hers, close enough for her to touch him again if she needed it. She did. Her fingertips brushed his knuckles, then rested lightly against the side of his hand. Your hand is steady, she whispered. It's used to holding things together. Including me, she asked softly. If you want that. Her breath caught, the kind that happens when someone hears something they didn't believe could ever be meant for them. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she slid her hand fully into his and held on. Her grip was weak but deliberate. Minutes passed like that, quiet, warm, grounded. The medbay hum was the only sound. But serenity never lasted long on Relo's station. A soft buzz came through Thomas's wrist device. A message. He didn't look immediately, but eventually he tilted his arm enough to read the brief text. HR escalation pending. Request meeting at 0600. They weren't wasting any time. Saren saw the tension shift in his jaw. What is it? Just HR being predictable. Her fingers tightened around his. Fear flickered across her eyes. Not fear of punishment, but fear of losing the one person who stood beside her today. They'll try to separate us, she said. They'll try, he replied, but I'm not stepping back. Her throat worked as she swallowed. I don't want you to get pulled into something that ruins your life here. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. My life here isn't worth anything if I'm supposed to watch them break you and pretend it's normal. Her breath trembled at the honesty of it. She shifted on the bed, slow from stiffness, and let her shoulder brush his forearm. The contact was small but intentional. Thomas, she whispered, if they force me to move sectors or restrict where I can go, I don't want to disappear without telling you. You won't disappear. You don't know that. He exhaled, steadying himself. The protective instinct rising in him wasn't impulsive. It was controlled, grounded, and very real. Saren, I need you to look at me. She lifted her eyes. I'm not letting them push you into a corner again, he said. I'm not here on their chain, and I'm not leaving you in a place where they think you don't matter. Her lips parted slightly, confusion mixing with something tender. Why me? She asked again, quieter this time. Of all the people you've met, why pull me out of that field? He didn't look away, because when you're on the ground, shaking, hurting, try to stay quiet, you still didn't cry. You didn't break. You didn't ask anyone for anything, and they acted like you were invisible. A pause. I saw you. Her control faltered. Not dramatically, just a soft tremor in her chin before she steadied herself. She brought her free hand up and touched his chest again, fingers pressing lightly through the fabric. Her palm rested over his heartbeat. You make me feel. Her voice broke once, then steadied. Safe. He covered her hand with his own, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist. A small sound escaped her, not a sob, not pain, just a release of tension she'd been carrying since the array. Come closer, she murmured. He shifted forward. She lifted her upper body, slowly, the blanket slipping slightly across her shoulder. He guided her gently, supporting her back as she sat upright against the raised bed. Their faces were close now, not rushed, not uncertain, just close enough for each breath to warm the other's skin. Her fingers slid to the side of his neck, tentative at first, then more certain. He didn't move away. He matched her pace, careful and unrushed. She leaned her forehead against his. Her breath sounded unsteady again, but not from pain this time. Thomas, she whispered. He brushed his thumb along the back of her hand. I'm here. She closed her eyes and released a slow, trembling exhale, the kind someone gives when they finally stop bracing for harm. She leaned into him fully, her arms slipping around him weakly. He wrapped an arm around her waist, not pulling her closer, just holding her steady as she pressed him. Her cheek nestled against the side of his neck, her breath warm against his skin. Don't let go, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. She melted into him then, her entire body settling into the lines of his, trusting the strength that had carried her across the clearing and straight through every barrier the station tried to put between them. Her lips brushed his collarbone. Not a kiss, more like the faintest instinctive contact from someone who'd forgotten what closeness without fear felt like. He tightened his hold slightly. She released another soft breath, almost an involuntary sound, and relaxed against him. The moment held, quiet, intimate grounding. Eventually, the exhaustion in her muscles pulled her toward sleep. Her grip on his shirt loosened. Her breathing shifted into smoother rhythms. Before her eyes closed fully, she murmured, "Will you be here when I wake up?" "Yes," he said. "Always." She fell asleep in his arms. Thomas stayed exactly where he was, holding her with the same steady strength that had started changing everything the moment he stepped across that yellow line. Saren slept against him for a long time, her breath warm against his neck, her body gradually losing the stiffness that had kept her guarded even while unconscious. The medbay lights dimmed into night cycle lows, quiet blues and muted whites, leaving their shared corner in a calm, steady glow. Thomas didn't move. His arm remained around her waist, supporting her weight, keeping her close without holding her too tightly. Every so often she made a soft sound, a small shift, a faint press of her fingers against his shirt. Each time, he adjusted just enough to keep her comfortable. When she finally stirred, it wasn't abrupt. Her breathing deepened first, then her fingers flexed against his chest. She blinked slowly, lifting her head slightly from his shoulder. Her voice came out low and rough. "You stayed? I said I would." She looked around, confused for a second, then settled when she realized they were still in the med bay. Her cheek brushed lightly against his shoulder as she tried to sit up straight. Thomas helped her without thinking, one hand supporting her spine, the other guiding her elbow. "Careful," he murmured. "Your muscles will still protest." "They already are," she whispered. She sat fully upright, though she leaned toward him, her thigh brushing his. Her posture held a mixture of soreness and something softer. Comfort, maybe, or familiarity. The door slid open briefly. The medic stepped in, checked her vitals, updated the chart, and left without a word. He'd stopped questioning why Thomas remained. When the door shut again, Saren's eyes drifted to Thomas's wrist device. "You didn't answer your HR message." "No need. They already know I'm not playing their game." "They'll escalate," she said. "Change my assignment. Move me. Hide me behind some internal rule. You think I'll let them?" Her breath caught slightly. "You can't be everywhere. I don't have to be everywhere." He turned slightly toward her. "I just have to be where it matters." Her eyes softened, but tension returned to her shoulders. Worry, not resistance. "What if they force me into assimilation protocol?" she asked. "They can claim I'm unstable, that I'm a risk. They've done it before. Then we challenge it." "Ow!" Thomas leaned forward, forearms on his knees, voice low and steady. "I'm requesting a full audit of non-citizen disciplinary practices. That includes you, the array, and every cycle they've logged without oversight." Her eyes widened. "You can do that?" "Yes." Her inhale was sharp but controlled. "They'll retaliate against you." "I'm aware." "Why risk that?" she asked. "You barely know me." He met her gaze head-on. "I've known enough." She searched his face, trying to understand the kind of certainty he carried. Certainty she hadn't seen in any human here. He continued, quieter now. "When I left the military, I swore I'd never follow another system blindly. Never stand in a room while someone suffered because rules said it was fine. I won't watch them hurt you again." Her breath loosened, her posture easing inch by inch. Inside her chest, something thawed, something careful, buried, and long denied. She shifted closer to him, her knee brushing his thigh again, this time on purpose. "Thomas," she whispered, "I don't want to leave this station alone when my contract ends." He turned fully toward her. "You won't. That's not a promise you can make so easily." "It is." She let out a shaky exhale and dropped her gaze, not out of fear, but overwhelmed by how simply he said it. He reached gently for her chin, guiding her eyes back to his. His thumb brushed lightly across her jaw. A small, involuntary sound escaped her. Not pain, but a quiet surrender to something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She leaned into his touch, letting her cheek rest against his palm. "You shouldn't touch me like this," she whispered. "Do you want me to stop?" Her answer came without hesitation. "No." He moved closer. Not fast, not demanding, just closing the space slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. She didn't. Her hand lifted to his chest again, fingers tracing the line of his collar, slipping gently along the warm skin at the base of his throat. The movement was hesitant, almost reverent, as if learning the shape of someone she trusted. She exhaled, soft and warm. "You make me forget where I am." "That's not a bad thing," he murmured. "Feels dangerous," she said. "Maybe," he admitted, "but you're safe. Right now, you're safe." She shifted closer until she sat pressed lightly against his side, her head just beneath his chin. His arm circled her without needing to be asked. She looked up at him. "Earlier, when the array held me in that position, I thought I'd disappear, that no one would notice if I never stood up again." His jaw tightened. "I noticed. You walked toward me when everyone else stepped back. I didn't step back because you deserved someone stepping forward." Silence settled again, gentle this time. Saren shifted, her hand rising to rest against the side of his neck. Her thumb traced the warm line beneath his ear. She breathed slowly, testing how close she could move without startling herself. Thomas tilted his head slightly, giving her that space. Her fingers slid to his jaw, and for a moment, she simply held his face in her hands, allowing herself to feel the steady warmth of him, the closeness, the truth of what he'd done for her. "Thomas," she whispered, barely audible. "Come closer." He did. Their foreheads touched, soft, grounding, intimate. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just closeness with intention. Her breath trembled against his lips as she whispered, "I want to stay with you tonight. Not like a patient. Not like someone you pulled out of a machine. Just me." He raised his hand and rested it gently against her waist, thumb brushing the line of her ribs, slow, reassuring. "You can," he said, "as long as you want that choice for yourself." Her voice broke in a way she didn't expect. "I do." The medbay lights dimmed another degree, leaving them in a soft glow. He didn't rush toward her. She didn't shy away. They moved closer at the same pace, careful, slow, deliberate, until their breaths blended and the warmth between them grew into something deeper, something neither of them tried to name yet. She rested her forehead against his again, eyes half closed. "Don't leave me," she whispered. He pulled her gently into his arms. "I'm right here." And for the first time since she arrived at Reload Station, Saren let herself believe she wasn't standing alone anymore.